So welcome back to these webinars on end-user computing. My name is Paul Murray. I'm a solutions architect at Nutanix in Northern Europe. And in today's session, we're going to be focusing on business continuity for the new working environment. So we've seen over the past couple of months that the workforce is essentially now remote, that working from anywhere has become the new normal. We also talked in the first session, the first webinar, about VDI being part of our DNA. And the two facts that VDI was, always will be the best workload for Nutanix, and Nutanix always was and always will be the best platform for your VDI solutions. So if that's the case, then we need to be able to understand which technologies I should be leading with, whether it's an on-prem solution or whether that is a cloud-based solution. So to be able to help us decide or to determine which solutions we should be leading with, I've tried to boil that down into a single question. That question being, does the customer already have a Citrix or a VMware deployment in use? If the customer answers yes to that, if your customer already has a Citrix VMware platform in use, then I would strongly suggest just to simply expand that existing deployment. The reason behind that, the customer's already invested in that infrastructure. Again, it could be on-prem, it could be cloud-based, but that allows us to use a thing that we call the one-click expansion. The ability to be able to expand an existing cluster with that additional resource through very few mouse clicks. The other alternative, the other answer to that question would be if the customers had nothing to do with VDI. If virtual desktop infrastructure, if end-user computing are completely foreign terms to that customer. In this case, I would suggest leading with XiFrame. The XiFrame, as we saw last time in the last session, XiFrame is our desktop as a service solution. The time to be able to set up a frame solution is less compared to an on-prem Citrix VMware solution. So that would allow your customers more agility. Spinning up that environment takes a lot less time compared to a Citrix VMware deployment. That being said, there are technical differences between the two solutions. So if you have to lead with Citrix or VMware, do that by all means, but make sure you have a VDI-focused Nutanix partner. So let's take a look at some of the reasons for expanding that existing deployment. If your account or if the customer's account has a private cloud focus, if your customer is looking at expanding the on-prem VDI or on-prem virtual app infrastructure, if you're already partnered with Citrix or a Citrix channel and they're strategic to you, again, reasons why you'd want to expand that existing deployment. On the technical side, few things. Employee devices could be legacy thin client or zero client. These typically don't work well in a desktop as a service infrastructure. If those endpoints have specific requirements, such as multi-monitor support, headsets for voice over IP, scanners, smart cards, things like that. Again, reasons to stay with a traditional on-prem VDI solution. Your virtual apps, your virtual desktops, the workloads, they are always on. Again, a benefit of desktop as a service is you pay as you consume. If you're not using that desktop, it's still powered on, it's still costing you money in the cloud. This doesn't apply to an on-prem solution. So if your virtual apps, virtual desktops, their workloads are always on, you've already invested in that infrastructure, so they will continue to run. So again, another reason why you would stay with an existing on-prem deployment. Persistent virtual desktop, similar sort of idea, if that's a requirement. If we look at specific verticals, so healthcare, financial services, they've often got specific requirements. Smart cards, I mentioned those, specialized certifications. So again, a few reasons why you may want to, or you would want to expand that existing deployment. If we look at Frame, if we look at the desktop as a service scenarios, then leading with Frame would be if that account, if your customers they're pursuing a cloud-first strategy. Another reason, one that I don't like talking about often, is the customer is not happy with traditional VDI or is looking simply for an alternative to a VDI solution. Another couple could be the flexibility of hybrid multi-cloud. So again, talked about this in the last session when we talked about XiFrame. One of the big benefits around Frame is the ability to be able to build a multi-cloud solution. So different cloud vendors, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, for example, and then tie that into an on-prem solution. So Xyframe on AHV, ultimately allowing you to build a hybrid multi-cloud solution. If your customers need speed, agility for their deployments, whether that be a completely new deployment or for incremental projects, again, one of the reasons to lead with Frame. The final one then being moving from CapEx to OpEx. So if the organization is following a CapEx to OpEx type story, then again, this is an ideal situation to be leading with Frame. So who should you be talking to? I mean, obviously the customer, but who within that customer organization? So again, I try to make the differentiation between different types of buyers. Now, while I was at Citrix, we talked about, I think there's 5 or 6 different types of buyers. So those are the virtualization admin, the network admin, the desktop admin, applications admin, the boss, so the VP of IT services, so people like that. So for this session, I've simplified that down into 2 distinct groups of people that you should be talking to. So obviously, first of all, the boss, so the VP, director type roles of IT, EUC, VDI, or however that customer has defined that department. So again, because of what's happening, because of the climate we're going through at the moment, they've just been asked to provide business continuity for 80, 90, 100% of their workforce. That needs to happen within a few days. It also needs to be able to simplify their VDI solutions. Those VPs, those directors, they in turn are talking to their VDI admins. So the desktop administrator, the application administrator, whose responsibility it now is to be able to roll out those tens, those hundreds, those thousands of desktops for these business continuity initiatives. Again, it needs to be scalable. We talked about that previously. So the linear scalability is a feature or a important part of the Nutanix architecture. So with the Nutanix on-prem, we can be sure that those solutions are scalable. They also don't want their employees complaining about the VDI solutions or the EUC solutions. Some of the pain points that these guys are going through. So again, differentiation between the decision makers, so the VPs, and the influencers or the desktop admins, application admins. So the pain points that they're going to be confronted with would be unreliable VDI services leading to employee complaints, slow integration, slow delivery of those applications and desktops, lack of staff to be able to manage those VDI deployments, those VDI environments. So again, some of the pain points that the decision makers are confronted with. Then if we look at the admins, the desktop admins, application admins, some of their challenges is it's time consuming, it's complex to deploy these applications, the infrastructure. It's time consuming to manage that VDI infrastructure. That also turns into difficulties troubleshooting stuff when it goes wrong. It's hardware, it's software, things are likely to fail. So they're confronted with troubleshooting those virtual applications, virtual desktop infrastructures. User experience, again, for these guys, extremely important. They don't want to be the reason for users complaining about applications not working or desktops not working. So they need a scalable and stable solution. We also talked last time about multi-vendors. So if we recall the stack of, I think there were 9 different layers in total. The multi-vendors also means multiple management tools, multiple vendors in there, multi-vendor management, stuff like that. Again, those are some of the pain points that your desktop admins would be confronted with the solution if it's not running on Nutanix or Citrix VMware. Some of the messages you need to get across to these guys. So by using Nutanix, by using Citrix or VMware on Nutanix and AHV, we can speed up that EUC deployment. We lower the risk of that VDI deployment failing. Built into the technologies, a secure virtual desktop. So again, a combination of the Citrix technologies and our technologies, we provide an environment where those applications, those desktops will run properly, will run correctly. So the users will want to use those environments. We can start small and scale out as requirements dictate. Again, this is part of the linear scalability, part of the one-click upgrades that I mentioned a few moments ago. You start with a small cluster. If you want to add in additional nodes, that one-click expansion is what you'd use. And then a few minutes later, that architecture is ready for the Citrix admin. The Citrix admin comes along and provisions those additional desktops. Ultimately, this is going to reduce the total cost of your infrastructure, the management of that infrastructure, and help desk support calls. If we look at the influencer, again, the desktop admins, the application admins, the key messages for those guys is they can deliver those virtual apps and virtual desktops in hours, in days, instead of weeks and months. We also cut down on the time that they spend deploying and managing those applications, managing that infrastructure. Essential to Nutanix is the management console. It's a thing called Prism. So Prism is a single pane of glass management concept through which you manage the complete Nutanix infrastructure. This also leads into simplicity for troubleshooting, for remediating any issues that might arise. And again, backed up by our world-class support. So the Nutanix support, we're always proud of this number. The NPS, so the Net Promoter Score, has always been over 90 now for the past 6 years. So again, it's a number that we're extremely proud of. Support guys that we've got are industry leading. Then once you've talked to these guys about the technologies, how it can help them, how it can assist them in providing a usable solution or a better solution, you then need to know what to show to your customer. I will always show this slide. If you want one slide that talks about everything good about Nutanix and Citrix and the better together story, then it's this one. So the bottom part of the stack, the first 5 pieces there, so networking, security, data protection, storage, server, virtualization technologies, that's what we do. That's the Nutanix HCI solution. And then on top of that, you have Citrix with the user profile management, secure remote access, I'll jump over to, and what they do, what they've been doing for many, many years, the delivery of those desktops and those applications, and the delivery protocol. Today called HCX, many years ago called ICA. So these two companies, Nutanix and Citrix, they're both leaders in their respective technologies, both leaders in EUC or hyperconverged infrastructure. It's a co-developed solution. It's pay as you grow. Again, mentioned this a few times. You can start with a 3-node cluster and you can expand that out as is required. A couple of nodes for a few more hundred users, or if you really, really need to, dozens of nodes for those thousands of users. It's going to offer that best-in-class user experience. Again, the Citrix protocol does this, so the HDX protocol understands the client requirements or the employee requirements. It can adapt to situations, so it can adapt to changes in the network conditions. So again, it gives you the best-in-class experience there. True hybrid cloud. Important here is the integration with the Citrix cloud story. So with Citrix, obviously they have their Citrix cloud, so the management components are all cloud-based. They take care of that for you as a customer. So we can tie into that story. There's a cloud connector that allows us to deploy a Nutanix cluster on-prem, be able to tie into or connect to your Citrix cloud story, to be able to use the management in the cloud. So again, the best of both worlds. And ultimately, it's ready to go in hours and not weeks. Again, some of the benefits of the Citrix Nutanix story. So that is the one slide that I would show an on-prem customer about why to go with Citrix and Nutanix. If we take the story a step further, there's additional technologies that we have. So Nutanix Files is our file server type architecture. So Nutanix Files consumes storage from the Nutanix cluster, be able to push out a file storage infrastructure for your employees. So employees have got user data. We can also use it for Windows profiles, home directories, departmental shares, and stuff like that. So the idea behind this is Nutanix Files is an add-on component to a Nutanix cluster. It's going to consume storage from that cluster, like I said. And the benefit behind that is we're essentially eliminating standalone file services. So it becomes more of an integrated solution. In addition to that, another product, Nutanix Flow. So as these environments become more and more complex, we need to introduce some sort of microsegmentation. So microsegmentation, by definition, what it basically does is it controls the network flow or the network traffic, the east-west network traffic. So traffic between virtual machines, between applications. So what I can do with Nutanix Flow is I can define policies that say, for example, that virtual machine A can talk to virtual machine B through a certain set of protocols. Or I can say that an application running on virtual machine A can talk to an application running on virtual machine B, again through a certain set of protocols. It also adheres to the one-click philosophy that we have. So I don't need to go changing IP tables. I just simply select the virtual machines, define the policy. I select a target virtual machine, apply a policy for that one, and then apply their policies to that infrastructure. So again, a very simplified way of applying microsegmentation for an end user computing environment. Extend that a step further with the other technologies that we have, other products that we have. So 3 here, XiLeap, XiBeam, and Nutanix clusters. So again, I mentioned that before. Anything to do with Xi is a cloud-based service. So XiLeap is our disaster recovery as a service offering. So XiLeap allows us or enables you to be able to protect your applications and data with disaster recovery in the cloud. You don't need to install any additional disaster recovery on your Nutanix cluster. You simply point your cluster or your protection domain, so the virtual machines you want to protect, to a disaster recovery service in the cloud. XiBeam, again, a cloud service. The idea behind that is to be able to minimize the cloud costs and security risks. So what it does, or the idea, the concept behind XiBeam is to understand, to uncover where your cloud spend is. So be able to determine how much I'm using or how much I'm spending on AWS or Google Cloud or Azure or whatever, and present that to you as a report so you can make informed decisions. It also has the ability to be able to determine security risks and then heal those security risks. So again, based on certain policies, I can decide, is that application compliant to this security definition? If not, I can then apply certain security policies. And then Nutanix clusters. So again, extension of the cluster architecture that we have into the cloud. So pretty much Nutanix clusters running in the cloud. So I can stretch my cluster, if you want, from on-prem to an AWS location, and have that as a single cloud. So true hybrid cloud for your applications running on those Nutanix clusters. And then the other one sounds wrong. Then the final part of the solution that we talked about when it comes to EUC or VDI is then desktop as a service. So XiFrame, again, we saw this in the first session, that's our desktop as a service offering. The idea behind it is customer choice in each of these steps. So you pick your infrastructure, your compute, your graphics, your networking components. You authorize those users, so the subsystems used to authorize users. So Okta, for example, Active Directory or Active Directory Federation services. So essentially any SAML type authentication subsystem. Then we need to be able to bring our own applications. So your Office applications, Adobe Suite, stuff like that. Your file storage, again, I always say this, a virtual desktop without data is pointless. There's no idea, there's no reason for that desktop. So we need to have storage. Again, it could be Nutanix Files for an on-prem solution. It could be OneDrive, Box, or whatever. So whatever you've decided to use already, you simply add that to the XiFrame solution. And then we deliver those applications, we deliver the desktops to your users, to your employees. Again, for customers that want to go the desktop as a service route, XiFrame is the solution of choice for that path. Then let's look at use cases. So which use cases make sense for which technology? So first of all, without going into individual use cases, individual customer examples, what I've tried to do here is to differentiate between Citrix VMware being on-prem and Frame being the desktop as a service or cloud-based solution. And 5 typical examples that you'll be confronted with today. So the first one we talked about is fast expansion, VDI attach. I also talked about the one-click upgrades, the one-click simplicity, the linear scalability of Citrix or VMware running on-prem on a Nutanix cluster. That's the reason why I would say if you're confronted with a fast expansion, a VDI attach requirement, then Citrix or VMware is the obvious choice there. If you're confronted with the fast rollouts, you need to get hundreds of users, hundreds of employees connected so they can work from home or work from anywhere, and you as a customer have never had anything to do with VDI or desktop as a service or end user computing, then Frame would be the logical choice. That being said, I'm not saying you should not lead with Citrix VMware. There are certain requirements, there are certain differences between the two technologies, which may lead you to suggest that the customer looks at a Citrix VMware on-prem solution. A couple of those examples where you'd want to do that would be things such as VPNs or virtual private networks. I've seen a lot of talk on LinkedIn, on Facebook, whatever, of customers or partners suggesting a VPN solution for their work from home requirements. Now, it does work. Of course it works. A virtual private network will allow me as an employee to be able to connect to my application that's running in the data center and use that application. But the data is still on my notebook. So I'm extending, if you want, I'm extending the network connectivity. We're also in a situation where we need to ramp up that deployment for potentially hundreds or thousands of users. So I'm not sure of the effect that that will have on the existing VPN solution. Now, an on-prem Citrix VMware solution, like I said a few times, it's more predictable, it's more scalable. What I'm also doing is the data is still in the data center. It's still close to the application. So a Citrix or a VMware solution, personally, in my opinion, is the better approach to be able to achieve these work from anywhere, work from home solutions requirements. Another one, voice over IP or Zoom. So, I mean, I'm recording this through some voice over IP technology, probably using a Zoom session in the background. It works better on a Citrix VMware deployment. So I'm not knocking Frame. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but Citrix and VMware have spent a lot of money, a lot of time investing in technologies that make voice over IP, that make video technologies, that make conferencing technologies work better in a virtual environment. And then the last one, bring your own devices or choose your own devices, again, essentially works for or is applicable to both solutions. So whether it's Citrix VMware or whether it's Frame, again, if your requirement is bring your own device, choose your own device, then you can lead or you can start with on-prem or a desktop as a service. Some of the targets, again, the differentiation between on-prem excuse me, and cloud-based solutions. So this isn't applicable just to business continuity for the climate that we see today. It's actually applicable to business continuity, whatever is happening on the planet. So VDI, hardware refresher expansion. Again, moving from legacy architecture to hyper-converged infrastructure. Nutanix is a perfect fit for that. I wouldn't say a good fit, I'll say a perfect fit for that. Our linear scalability, the one-click expansions, the one-click management that we've been talking about, again, ideal examples of why you'd want to move from legacy architecture to hyper-converged. You may have new VDI initiatives, bring your own device, choose your own device, just mentioned those a few minutes ago. Migrations, it's always been the classic example. So desktop application virtualization for your employees or migration. Again, another example of a perfect target for VDI end user computing on Nutanix. And then file services. Again, I say this a lot. A desktop without data is pointless. So we can use the Nutanix HCI solution. We can add in Nutanix Files into the complete equation. And then you have an integrated solution where we have this storage layer. That's where your virtual desktops are consumed from. Your employees using those virtual desktops then consume storage again from your Nutanix cluster. So a single integrated solution. A couple of examples of customers that have done that. So Thorough Cancel, GAO in the States, and then Assurant, again, moving from or running their VDI solutions on a Nutanix architecture. Some of the conversation starters you may want to look at or may want to start remembering. So ask customers how they manage their desktops, how they manage their laptops or their infrastructure. So that would be uncovering the current state of the question, the current state of the customer. If you're trying to determine the future state, some questions may be, what are some of the major areas of improvement for delivering desktops to end users in the business? One thing that I'll keep saying it, is to get across to customers is the one-click simplicity, the linear scalability of a Nutanix solution. It applies to these three solutions or these three ideas. So VDI hardware, refresh or expansion, new VDI initiatives, or if customers are struggling with file services. We look at the other side of the coin, so desktop as a service requirements. Again, if your customers are looking at DaaS solutions with Frame, then there's a few unique identifiers or unique targets for desktop as a service. So seasonal workloads. Now, what I mean by that is you have an existing deployment. It could be, for example, a school or a university. So Georgetown University in this case, they have courses that could run 6 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, or whatever. So think of that as a project. You don't really know how much resources you need for those students until those students start to work. So the ability with Frame to be able to rapidly scale up and rapidly scale down due to contractors, due to schedules, mergers and acquisitions, for example, again, is an ideal target for Frame or desktop as a service. The obvious one, cloud-first initiatives. So a lot of customers today, a lot of companies today, they are looking at a cloud-first initiative. By using Frame, by bringing Frame into the equation, we can talk about this multi-cloud, the hybrid cloud strategies that Frame will allow. Being able to run your applications, your desktops on your choice of cloud provider. Then Windows to Web, what I sort of say here is I call that the Starbucks startup. So software vendors that don't want to invest in infrastructure, but they still do require or still do need access to virtual desktops. So those virtual desktops running in the cloud allows those companies to be able to develop their software, create their web pages, but without having to invest in any of the infrastructure on-prem. So Windows to Web is what we call it. Personally, I call it the Starbucks startups. And then same sort of example as before. So conversation starters for desktop as a service. So current state, to be able to uncover that, is tell me about your current processes to handle onboarding your seasonal workers, your interns, your contractors. That then leads into the previous example. So being able to deploy desktops based on those unknown or bursty type scenarios. If you want to look at the future state, so what are your services? Or what service are you looking to quickly integrate into applications and desktops for end users and the business? And this could be your cloud-first strategy. Same as before applies to, for example, seasonal workloads, cloud-first initiatives, and then Windows to Web or Starbucks startup initiatives. So a few closing words. Try to bring all these pieces together as a summary. So I talked about 4 main messages. The first one being what to know or what to lead with. So understanding the customer requirements, be able to help you decide, do I lead with on-prem or do I lead with desktop as a service? The simple question, does your customer already have Citrix or VMware in place? If yes, expand that. If no, if it's completely foreign to them, start with iframe. Then we talked about who you should be talking to. Again, there's a lot of different persona within a customer organization. For today's situation, for EUC and business continuity, I would suggest talking to obviously the boss or the VP, director of IT, and his desktop and application admins. Those are the guys that are facing the pressure to be able to spin up these environments for hundreds or thousands of users. Then we looked at the different solutions. Again, I say every time, one thing I always talk about is Citrix and Nutanix embedded together. So the stack or the 9 layers of different technologies. So Nutanix obviously looking after the bottom 5, Citrix looking after the top 5. It's an integrated solution. Both vendors are market leaders in their respective technologies. And then we looked at frame, so customer choice at each point. So bring your applications, bring your infrastructure, bring your storage solutions, tying that all together, and then providing the employees with a simple username, password to be able to log on and access those resources. So that was essentially the introduction, or the few words around business continuity and end user computing. In the next session, I will be talking more about the technicalities. So how to design these solutions, how to size these solutions. Thanks very much for listening. I'll explain this rock a sock in a one day, but keep rocking those socks. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.